At least 16 dead and over 140 still missing in the Florida condo collapse. Rescue teams now feeling the physical and emotional effects after nearly a week of searching, but they're keeping hope alive. Infrastructure still in the crosshairs. President Biden touting his plan in Wisconsin, while top Republican Senator Mitch McConnell is asking Democrats to delink the bipartisan infrastructure plan from the human infrastructure plan. This comes as a Republican member of Congress wants to take all the earmarks out of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, totaling $5.6 billion in spending. And the House passed a bill to remove statues of Confederacy from the Capitol building, calling them symbols of hate and division. That echoes a National Archives report that described the federal agency's rotunda as a symbol of structural racism. Tune in to Deep Dive as we explore these topics and more. Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive and I'm Tiffany Meier. Let's kick off with the Sunshine State. While the sun might be shining in Florida, hearts are heavy. At least 16 confirmed dead in the Florida condo collapse. A fire official saying Thursday morning rescue crews found tunnels Wednesday night. In those tunnels, they found more dead and more human remains. With the rising death toll, the number of unaccounted for is going down. There's still over 140 people missing. The fire official says the next of kin have yet to be notified. After nearly a week of searching, rescuers are feeling the physical and emotional weight of it all, but they aren't giving up.
It's just so hard to, unless you're there, you don't understand how difficult it is to work. All I can say is that I thank God for the support of my teammates.
Miami Rescue Coordinator Captain Eddy Alarcon said Tuesday night that they've put themselves in the shoes of the family members, and none of them have given up hope.
I know miracles happen, and I believe in a higher power, and I believe that if somebody's going to find them, we're going to do it. We're going to make it happen.
Weather conditions have also played a role, with approaching storms slowing rescue efforts. The Miami-Dade County Mayor says she's working hard to make sure this does not happen again. That's why they're continuing mandatory building audits in the county for buildings 40 years and older. A government audit found that 24 apartment complexes in Miami-Dade County are unsafe due to structural violations. The emergency audit was authorized after the partial collapse of the condominium building in Surfside, Florida last week. The mayor said falling debris caused a dangerous work environment for the west pile of rubble. It had to be cordoned off as crews worked to locate the 140 people who are still missing.
They've made very good progress on the east end. It's apparent that they've got the pile down to the point where you can see into the parking lot.
An engineer's report in 2018 found the condo had structural problems. A Florida lawyer is now filing a class action lawsuit against the condo association. He alleges the collapse could have been prevented had the association implemented safety measures and had proper oversight.
Because this hits home. This is our backyard, and this should not happen. This should not have happened. And anyone liable, anyone responsible, whether it's political, whether it's legislative, we will find them and hold them liable.
The attorney says he wants to bring the investigation into the court system so that it stays organized. President Biden and the First Lady are set to visit the site of the collapse on Thursday to meet with victims and survivors. Now, speaking of Biden, how is the infrastructure package coming along? Biden arrived in Wisconsin yesterday to promote his infrastructure plan. He likened his plan to the scope of President Eisenhower's interstate system.
65 years ago today, President Dwight Eisenhower signed a bill that created the interstate highway system. 65 years ago today. That was the last infrastructure investment of the size and scope of what agreement I'm about to talk about today.
Negotiations have been rocky. Despite this latest bipartisan push, there's still a lot up in the air before the bill gets passed. The bill is already seeing changes being levied against it. Republican Congressman Ted Budd introduced an amendment to the plan. It would slash over 1,400 earmark projects, totaling $5.6 billion in spending. Earmarks allow individual members of Congress to insert and fund personal projects in larger bills. They are now called member-designated projects. Budd explains his reasoning, saying in a statement, taxpayers across the country are getting their first look at what Washington is like in the new earmark era. It's not a pretty sight. He adds this bill includes nearly 1,500 examples of Washington spending taxpayer dollars. Earmarks became a symbol of wasteful and corrupt spending in Washington in the early 2000s. highlighted by the infamous $223 million bridge to nowhere earmark. Republicans ended the practice in the House in 2011. Democrats brought it back to the House this year after a decade-long absence with some reforms. The process now requires each provision to be publicly identified with a member. Democrat Representative Peter DeFazio says it allowed members of Congress to directly advocate for viable projects in the infrastructure bill. Democrat members inserted over 1,000 projects into the infrastructure bill worth almost $4 billion. Just over 400 Republican projects got in, worth $1.7 billion. But says if an earmarked project is truly worthy of taxpayer funding, then it should be proposed individually on the House floor or as a competitive grant. Every taxpayer dollar is sacred and should be treated that way. The House Rules Committee is set to decide if members can vote on Budd's amendment. Now, top leaders on both sides of the aisle are weighing in as well. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell remains undecided. He tells reporters we need to see whether the proposal is credibly paid for before he will decide. He's also calling on Democratic leaders to follow Biden's lead to separate the bipartisan infrastructure plan from the human infrastructure plan. But Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer fired back, telling reporters one can't be done without the other. We can't get the bipartisan bill done unless we are sure of getting the budget reconciliation bill done. And House Speaker Nancy Pelosi also weighed in, saying we will not take up a bill in the House until the Senate passes the bipartisan bill and a reconciliation bill. Biden originally had a similar message, saying he would not sign the bipartisan package without his family's plan coming in tandem. He immediately faced backlash from Republicans. Biden soon backpedaled on his ultimatum, saying it was not his intent to put the bipartisan deal in jeopardy. McConnell is now calling on Pelosi and Schumer to follow Biden's lead, saying without Schumer and Pelosi delinking the bills, Biden's walk back is hollow. Republicans now saying they'll refuse to vote for the bipartisan deal if a reconciliation deal is passed with it. Senator Lindsey Graham wrote in a tweet, "No deal by extortion." But some progressives are unswayed. Senator Bernie Sanders wrote in a tweet, "No reconciliation bill, no deal. We need transformative change now." Sanders is pushing for a $6 trillion package that would include a variety of social welfare funding, such as Medicare expansion, affordable housing, childcare, and etc. Staying in the Capitol, the House passed a bill to remove Confederate statues in the Capitol. The bill seeks to remove monuments depicting Confederate supporters from the U.S. Capitol. They include a bust of Chief Justice Roger B. Taney, who authored a key decision supporting slavery. The Taney bust will be replaced by one of Thurgood Marshall, the first black Supreme Court justice. The bill passed 285 to 120. All opposition votes were cast by Republicans. The legislation is now headed to the Senate, where Democrats have a razor-thin majority. They'll need at least 10 Republican supporters to advance the bill. Republican Representative Mo Brooks of Alabama on Twitter called the bill an example of cancel culture and historical revisionism by elitists who claim they know more than regular citizens. The bill echoes a National Archives report calling the federal agency's iconic rotunda structurally racist. The rotunda has housed original copies of the Declaration of Independence, U.S. Constitution, and the Bill of Rights since 1952. One professor wrote in his blog post that it does not require reimagination to understand the power and significance of those documents. This is the second year in a row that the lower congressional chamber passed a measure to remove Confederate statues from the Capitol. The Republican-controlled Senate blocked the bill in 2020. The bill came amid protests across the country calling for racial justice following the death of George Floyd. While Congress cannot remove the statues, the bill would enable the statues to be moved away from any area of the Capitol. They would be accessible to the public within 120 days after the measure is enacted. The statues would be returned to the state that provided it, if the state agrees to cover costs for transportation. That's all if the bill passes. Some states have already started. Last year, the state of Virginia removed a statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee from the Capitol, replacing it with a statue of civil rights leader Barbara Jones. Now, let's turn to New York and the question of to charge or not to charge former President Trump. According to the Wall Street Journal, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office is expected to charge the Trump Organization with tax crimes on Thursday. The newspaper reported the company's chief financial officer, Alan Weisselberg, will also be charged. The DA's office has been investigating the Trump Organization for tax-related fraud in connection with benefits awarded to employees, including school tuition, cars, and rent-free apartments. This comes as a lawyer for former President Trump says he does not believe Trump himself will be charged. Trump attorney Ronald Fischetti says he spoke with Manhattan DA Cy Vance's team last week about the charges they were considering. Vance has been investigating the Trump Organization and Trump's finances for years. But according to Fischetti, the DA currently has no plans to charge Trump himself. Speaking to Politico Monday, Fischetti said members of Vance's team told him that only charges against the Trump Organization and its individual employees were being considered. The charges are related to alleged failures to pay taxes on corporate benefits and perks. According to Fischetti, the team also told him they have no charges related to allegations of hush money, payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels. The Trump lawyer called the amount of charges crazy, saying to Politico that the charges are so small that he can't believe he's going to have to try a case like this. But what do you think? Let me know below. Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and see you soon.